Listening section directions. The listening section measures your ability to understand conversations and lectures in English. You will hear each conversation and lecture only one time. After each conversation or lecture, you will hear some questions about it. Answer all questions based on what the speakers state or imply. You may take notes while you listen. You may use your notes to help you answer the questions. Most questions have 4 possible answers. In some questions, you will see this icon. This means that you will hear but not see part of the question. Some questions have special directions, which appear in a gray box. Most questions are worth 1 point. If a question is worth more than 1 point, special directions will indicate how many points you can receive. You have approximately 40 minutes to complete the listening section. This includes the time for listening to the conversations and lectures and for answering the questions. To make this practice more like the real test, cover the questions and answers during each conversation and lecture. When you hear the first question, uncover the questions and answers. Questions 1 through 5. Listen to a conversation in a university office.
Good afternoon. May I help you?
Yes, I hope so. My name is Jennifer Taylor, and I'm in the communications program. Our class is doing a radio program, and we'll have interviews with a lot of people from all parts of campus life. We'd like to interview the new Dean of Students, if he's willing.
That sounds interesting.
I hope Dean Evans will agree to meet with us, and let us tape the conversation for the radio. It would be a way for the whole community to get to know him, get to know his ideas and everything, like the kind of vision he has for the university.
How much time would you need?
Oh, probably about an hour, no more than that.
I'm sure the dean would like to participate, but, his schedule's pretty tight.
Oh, I was afraid of that.
He's all tied up this week. Everybody wants to, get acquainted, but we can probably work something in. When would you like to do the interview?
The radio station can air the show on either the 16th or the 23rd, so we'd have to work around that.
Let me look at the dean's schedule. Let's see. Looks like he's got a lot of meetings this week and most of next week, too. But what about the week after that? He doesn't have anything scheduled on Tuesday or Wednesday afternoon. Would either of those days work for you?
Yeah, I think so. How about Tuesday afternoon?
On Tuesday, he's free from 2 o'clock till 4:30.
Let's see. I'll be in class until 2:30, so how about 3?
All right. 3 o'clock, Tuesday, April 15th.
Okay, that will be great. Thank you so much. This will be a great way for everyone to learn about our new dean. We really appreciate the opportunity to do this.
You're really quite welcome. It's our pleasure. In fact, I put it on the dean's calendar, and we will see you on the 15th.
The 15th. Okay, thank you very much.
Number 1. What is the purpose of the conversation? Number 2. Why does the man say this?
I'm sure the dean would like to participate, but, his schedule's pretty tight.
Number 3. Why does the woman want to meet with the dean? Number 4. What can be inferred about the dean? Number 5. When will the meeting with the dean take place? Questions 6 through 10. Listen to part of a conversation between 2 students. They are studying for an economics test.
Okay, so what do we do next?
Why don't we go over the chapter on analysis of costs?
That'll be on the test.
Okay.
Let's start with opportunity cost. That part's still confusing to me. I understand fixed cost and variable cost and marginal cost, the cost of producing one more unit of something. I'm sure there'll be a question about that on the test. But I don't get opportunity cost.
Opportunity cost. That's when you have to consider the things you give up when you make a certain decision. You have an opportunity cost when you're forced to choose between different alternatives.
Okay, that sort of makes sense.
Say you want to have your own business, so you open a restaurant. You put in 60 hours a week, but you don't pay yourself wages. At the end of the first year, your restaurant shows a profit of, say, $30,000. Looks pretty good for a small business. But is it really that good? An economist would say no, because you have to count your own labor as a cost, even if you don't get paid. You have to consider that you had alternative opportunities for work, and you have to count that lost opportunity as a cost. You could have taken a job at, say, an accounting firm and earned $50,000 a year. This is the opportunity cost, the earnings you gave up because you decided to open your own business instead.
Okay, so what that means is, if I lost $50,000 by not taking an accounting job, then my restaurant's profit of $30,000 isn't that great after all, at least in an economic sense. Maybe I had more enjoyment, though. I mean, the enjoyment of being my own boss.
Right. But your enjoyment comes with a cost. An economist would say the real profit of your restaurant isn't $30,000. You'd have to subtract the $50,000 opportunity cost of your own labor. When you subtract $50,000 from $30,000, you find you have a net loss of $20,000.
Wow! That means the enjoyment of having my own business cost me $20,000?
Yeah, something like that.
This is really different from what we learned about costs in my accounting class. I think an accountant would say my $30,000 profit made me a viable business. But an economist, if I understand it correctly, an economist would say my business is a loser.
Right. And that's because an economist tries to look at all the factors, all the costs. An economist would count the opportunity cost.
An economist looks at the big picture.
Right. An economist's definition of costs is broader than an accountant's. Opportunity cost is actually a very broad concept. It takes into account the cost of the choices we make. When we choose one thing, we have to give up something else.
That's right. We chose to go to college, so that means we had to give up full-time employment, for the time being.
Right. So, how do you measure the true cost of a college education?
Well, it's more than what we pay for in tuition and books. We have to subtract the income we lose by not working full-time.
Yeah, and that's why college is really more expensive than it seems.
Number 6. What are the students mainly discussing? Number 7. How does the man help the woman understand a concept that she finds difficult? Number 8. Listen again to part of the conversation, then answer the question.
Say you want to have your own business, so you open a restaurant. You put in 60 hours a week, but you don't pay yourself wages. At the end of the first year, your restaurant shows a profit of, say, $30,000. Looks pretty good for a small business. But is it really that good?
Why does the man ask this?
But is it really that good?
Number 9. According to the man, how does an economist's view of costs differ from that of an accountant? Number 10. What can be inferred about the true cost of a college education? Questions 11 through 16. Listen to part of a lecture in a geology class.
Mount St. Helens is in the Cascade Range, a chain of volcanoes running from southern Canada to northern California. Most of the peaks are dormant. What I mean is they're sleeping now, but are potentially active. Mount St. Helens has a long history of volcanic activity, so the eruptions of 1980 weren't a surprise to geologists. The geologists who were familiar with the mountain had predicted she would erupt. The eruption cycle had sort of a harmless beginning. In March of 1980, seismologists picked up signs of earthquake activity below the mountain, and during the next week, the earthquakes increased rapidly, causing several avalanches. These tremors and quakes were signs that large amounts of magma were moving deep within the mountain. Then, suddenly, one day there was a loud boom. A small crater opened on the summit. St. Helens was waking up. The vibrations and tremors continued. All during April, there were occasional eruptions of steam and ash. This attracted tourists and hikers to come and watch the show. It also attracted seismologists, geologists, and, of course, the news media. By early May, the north side of the mountain had swelled out into a huge and growing bulge. The steam and ash eruptions became even more frequent. Scientists could see that the top of the volcano was sort of coming apart. Then there were a few days of quiet, but it didn't last long. It was the quiet before the storm. On the morning of May 18th, a Sunday, at around 8 o'clock, a large earthquake broke loose the bulge that had developed on the north face of the mountain. The earthquake triggered a massive landslide that carried away huge quantities of rock. Much of the north face sort of swept down the mountain. The landslide released a tremendous sideways blast. Superheated water in the magma chamber exploded, and a jet of steam and gas blew out of the mountain's side with tremendous force. Then came the magma, sending up a cloud of superheated ash. In only 25 seconds, the north side of the mountain was blown away. Then the top of the mountain went too, pouring out more ash, steam, and magma. The ash cloud went up over 60,000 feet in the air, blocking the sunlight. Altogether, the eruptions blew away 3 cubic kilometers of the mountain and devastated more than 500 kilometers of land. The energy of the blast was equivalent to a hydrogen bomb of about 25 megatons. It leveled all trees directly to the northeast and blew all the water out of some lakes. The blast killed the mountain's goats, millions of fish and birds, thousands of deer and elk, and around 60 people. The ash cloud drifted around the world, disrupting global weather patterns. For over 20 years now, Mount St. Helens has been dormant. However, geologists who've studied the mountain believe she won't stay asleep forever. The Cascade Range is volcanically active. Future eruptions are certain, and unfortunately, we can't prevent them.
Number 11. According to the professor, how did the cycle of volcanic eruptions begin? Number 12. Why does the professor say this?
This attracted tourists and hikers to come and watch the show. It also attracted seismologists, geologists, and, of course, the news media.
Number 13. Listen again to part of the lecture, then answer the question.
By early May, the north side of the mountain had swelled out into a huge and growing bulge. The steam and ash eruptions became even more frequent. Scientists could see that the top of the volcano was sort of coming apart. Then there were a few days of quiet, but it didn't last long. It was the quiet before the storm.
What does the professor mean when he says this?
Then there were a few days of quiet, but it didn't last long.
Number 14. The professor explains what happened when Mount St. Helens erupted. Indicate whether each sentence below was part of the event. Number 15. What were some effects of the eruption? Number 16. What can be concluded about Mount St. Helens? Questions 17 through 22. A botanist has been invited to speak to a geography class. She will be discussing aromatic trees of North America. Listen to part of the talk.
When European explorers first approached the coast of North America, even before their ships landed, the first thing they noticed was the pungent aroma carried to the ships by the offshore breezes. Some sea captains thought this aroma was the scent of the valuable oriental spices that had prompted their voyages of exploration. But in fact, the agreeable smells didn't come from spices. They came from the lush vegetation of the North American forests. The fragrance came from the blossoms of numerous trees and from the volatile oils in pine sap. Pine sap is a resinous fluid that pine trees put out to heal wounds caused by wind, fire, and lightning, and also to protect the pine tree's seeds. Pine sap was a valuable commodity to the sailors who explored the coast. The smell of pine meant there was an abundant supply of what were known as naval stores, pitch and pine tar. Pitch and pine tar were thick, sticky, semi-solid substances that were made by distilling pine wood. Sailors used naval stores for caulking and waterproofing their wooden ships, which kept them seaworthy. The Europeans found fragrant trees all along the Atlantic coast, from Massachusetts in the north to Florida in the south. Everywhere along the coast, the air was filled with the strong perfume of the flowering dogwood. The Native Americans already knew about the medicinal properties of the dogwood, and they used its bark and roots to treat malaria and other fevers. They brewed the aromatic bark into a bitter, astringent tea. European settlers also used the dogwood to relieve attacks of malaria. They soaked the dogwood bark in whiskey and drank the strong infusion. This was before they knew about quinine from South America and before quinine became available. In the South, probably the best-known aromatic tree was the sassafras. The sassafras is a fast-growing tree, a member of the laurel family. Like the other fragrant laurels, cinnamon, bay, and camphor, sassafras is noted for its aromatic bark, leaves, roots, flowers, and fruit. I have a sassafras twig with me here, which I'll pass around so you can all enjoy its smell. Just give it a small scrape with your thumbnail to release the scent. I think you'll find it strong but pleasant. The Choctaw Indians used powdered sassafras leaves as a spice. Other Native American tribes used sassafras tonic as a cure for everything from fever to stomachache. News of this wonder tree reached Europe in the 16th century by way of the French and the Spanish, and sassafras was one of the first exports from North America to Europe. It sold for a high price on the London market, which sort of inspired other English explorers to seek their fortunes in the North American colonies. For centuries, sassafras enjoyed a fantastic reputation as a cure for almost every disease. Maybe you've heard of the medicinal spring tonic of the old days. Well, sassafras was a main ingredient in spring tonic, the stuff pioneer parents gave their kids. My grandmother had to take spring tonic that her grandmother made from sassafras. Sassafras leaves, bark, and roots used to provide the flavoring for root beer and chewing gum. Sassafras was also used in soaps and perfumes. However, in the 1960s, the United States Food and Drug Administration found sassafras oil to be a potential carcinogen for humans because it caused cancer in rats. Since that time, sassafras has been banned for human consumption. No one really knows just how harmful it is to human beings, but some studies show that 1 cup of strong sassafras tea contains more than 4 times the amount of the volatile oil safrole that is hazardous to humans if consumed on a regular basis.
Number 17. According to the speaker, what did European explorers notice as they sailed toward the shores of North America? Number 18. According to the speaker, why was pine sap a valuable commodity? Number 19. How was the flowering dogwood used? Number 20. Why does the speaker say this?
Just give it a small scrape with your thumbnail to release the scent. I think you'll find it strong but pleasant.
Number 21. Why was sassafras once considered a wonder tree? Number 22. Listen again to part of the talk. Then answer the question.
However, in the 1960s, the United States Food and Drug Administration found sassafras oil to be a potential carcinogen for humans because it caused cancer in rats. Since that time, sassafras has been banned for human consumption. No one really knows just how harmful it is to human beings, but some studies show that 1 cup of strong sassafras tea contains more than 4 times the amount of the volatile oil safrole that is hazardous to humans if consumed on a regular basis.
What does the speaker imply about sassafras? Questions 23 through 28. Listen to part of a discussion in a philosophy class. The class is studying Plato.
Plato believed the only true reality consists of ideas. Thus, we often refer to his philosophy as idealism. He didn't think people could create ideas. Rather, we discovered them. For instance, the mathematical concept of 2 plus 2 equals 4, this is an idea that's always existed. It's always been true that 2 plus 2 equals 4, even before people discovered it. Plato's ideas were, and still are, valuable because they've stimulated a great deal of thinking about the meaning and purpose of humanity, society, and education. The ideas of Plato survive in our thinking today and survive in our educational system. Another important principle, yes?
Excuse me, Dr. McDonald, but could you, say more about how Plato's ideas are in education today?
Sure. Plato believed the state should take an active role in education. Most governments today agree. And the state should create a curriculum that leads students from thinking about concrete information toward thinking about abstract ideas. Higher-level thinking would develop the individual student's character and thus ultimately benefit the larger society. Plato believed our most important goal was the search for truth. The idealists of today generally agree that a major focus of education should be on the search for knowledge, but some feel it's not truth per se that's important, as much as the search for truth. Idealists favor learning that's holistic over learning that's specialized. For instance, Idealists consider subjects like chemistry and physics useful, but they're of real value only when they help us to see the whole picture of our universe. Idealists aren't concerned with turning out graduates with specific technical skills as much as giving students a broad understanding of the world they live in.
But isn't that kind of impractical? I mean, most of us go to college because we want knowledge about certain subjects, not the whole universe.
Idealists believe that education should teach students to think, not what to think, but how to think. Thinking is the skill that develops character. If you develop the ability to think, you and all of humanity will become more noble and rational.
The philosophy of idealism seems kind of conservative.
Idealism is often criticized as being a conservative philosophy because so much of its emphasis is on character development and preserving traditions. Idealists care about ultimate truths, so their notion of education is largely a matter of passing on knowledge.
But what's the ultimate truth? Who gets to decide what's true?
Who gets to decide what's true? Excellent question. And it's questions like this that have led to a weakening of idealism today. Developments in science and technology have changed what we've thought of as true. Our contemporary emphasis on relevance, usefulness, and innovation, as opposed to lasting values, all of these trends have cut idealism down to size.
I think all the concern with character development is kind of old-fashioned. Doesn't that make people, doesn't it just lead to conformity?
Good point. Critics of idealism would agree with you that character development comes at the expense of creativity, and that too much emphasis on traditional values can be harmful if it makes students stop questioning what they're being taught.
Number 23. What aspect of Plato's philosophy does the professor mainly discuss? Number 24. Why does the professor mention the mathematical concept of 2 plus 2 equals 4? Number 25. What do idealists believe about higher-level thinking? Number 26. Listen again to part of the discussion, then answer the question.
Idealists aren't concerned with turning out graduates with specific technical skills as much as giving students a broad understanding of the world they live in.
But isn't that kind of impractical? I mean, most of us go to college because we want knowledge about certain subjects, not the whole universe.
What is the woman's attitude toward the idealist view of education? Number 27. Listen again to part of the discussion. Then answer the question.
Who gets to decide what's true? Excellent question. And it's questions like this that have led to a weakening of idealism today. Developments in science and technology have changed what we've thought of as true. Our contemporary emphasis on relevance, usefulness, and innovation, as opposed to lasting values, all of these trends have cut idealism down to size.
What does the professor mean when he says this?
All of these trends have cut idealism down to size.
Number 28. According to the professor, what do critics say about idealism? Questions 29 through 34. Listen to part of a lecture in a physics class. The professor is discussing energy and work.
In physics, energy is defined as the ability to do work. And in physics, work doesn't refer to what you do at your job. In physics, work means moving an object when there is some resistance to its movement. Every time we lift an object, push it, pull it, or carry it, we are doing work. Two things are necessary for work to occur. First, force, or energy, must be applied to the object. If no energy is used, no work has been done. Second, the object must be moved a distance. If the object is pushed or pulled but it doesn't move, no work has been done. When we move an object, there's always some resistance or opposition to movement. Resistance is a force that tends to oppose or slow down movement. Whenever an object meets resistance, more energy is needed to do the work. A good example is what happens when a farmer's plow moves through the soil. The plow encounters resistance if it gets too deep into the soil, or if rocks and roots in the soil make the soil hard to turn. When this happens, the tractor's engine has to work harder. The engine strains under the load and uses more fuel. Each time we do work, we use energy. If our muscles do the work, energy in the form of food is required. If a machine does the work, energy in the form of oil, gas, coal, electricity, or some other source is required. Without energy, no work can be done. Energy comes in several different forms. It can take the form of heat, light, motion, electricity, chemical energy, nuclear energy, and so on. Energy can change forms, but it cannot be created or destroyed. Energy is always conserved. That is a law of nature. This law is known as the law of conservation of energy, or the first law of thermodynamics. The law states that energy can be converted from any form to any other form, but no matter what form it takes, it's still energy, and none of the energy disappears when it changes form. Machines do work by converting one form of energy to another. For example, a car converts the chemical energy in gasoline to kinetic energy, to motion. A stove converts electrical energy or chemical energy into heat energy that cooks our food. The law of conservation of energy tells us that a machine needs to have a source of energy, and a machine can't supply more power than it gets from its energy source. When the fuel runs out, the machine stops. The same rule applies to living organisms. If the organism doesn't have food, it dies. The law of conservation of energy tells us that the energy of any system, whether the system is a machine, a living organism, or an ecosystem, that the energy must balance out in the end. The amount of energy in the system is conserved, even though the energy changes forms. The Earth as a whole is a complex system that receives almost all its energy from the sun in the form of light. Some of the solar energy converts to heat, which warms the Earth. Some of it evaporates water, forms clouds, and produces rain. Some energy is captured by plants and is turned into chemical energy during photosynthesis. The first law of thermodynamics, conservation of energy, says the Earth must end up with the same amount of energy it started out with. The energy changes forms, but no energy is lost or gained.
Number 29. How does the field of physics define work? Number 30. Listen again to part of the lecture. Then answer the question.
Whenever an object meets resistance, more energy is needed to do the work. A good example is what happens when a farmer's plow moves through the soil. The plow encounters resistance if it gets too deep into the soil, or if rocks and roots in the soil make the soil hard to turn. When this happens, the tractor's engine has to work harder. The engine strains under the load and uses more fuel.
Why does the professor talk about a plow? Number 31. Based on the information in the lecture, indicate whether each statement below reflects the first law of thermodynamics. Number 32. Which two sentences illustrate the conversion of energy from one form to another? Number 33. Listen again to part of the lecture. Then answer the question.
The law of conservation of energy tells us that a machine needs to have a source of energy. And a machine can't supply more power than it gets from its energy source. When the fuel runs out, the machine stops. The same rule applies to living organisms. If the organism doesn't have food, it dies.
Why does the professor say this?
The same rule applies to living organisms. If the organism doesn't have food, it dies.
Number 34. What can be inferred about the energy in the Earth as a whole system? Speaking section directions. The speaking section measures your ability to speak in English about a variety of topics. There are 6 questions in this section. Record your response to each question on a cassette. Questions 1 and 2 are independent speaking tasks in which you will speak about familiar topics. Your responses will be scored on your ability to speak clearly and coherently about the topics. Questions 3 and 4 are integrated tasks in which you will read a passage, listen to a conversation or lecture, and then speak in response to a question about what you have read and heard. You will need to combine relevant information from the 2 sources to answer the question completely. Your responses will be scored on your ability to speak clearly and coherently, and on your ability to accurately convey information about what you read and heard. Questions 5 and 6 are integrated tasks in which you will listen to part of a conversation or lecture and then speak in response to a question about what you have heard. Your responses will be scored on your ability to speak clearly and coherently and on your ability to accurately convey information about what you heard. You will hear each conversation and lecture only one time. You may take notes while you listen. You may use your notes to help you answer the questions. What game do you enjoy playing? Describe the game and explain why you like to play it. Include details and examples in your explanation. Some people drive their own car to school or work. Others ride a bus, train, or other form of public transportation. Which do you think is better and why? Include details and examples in your explanation. Now listen to a student as he discusses online courses with his academic advisor.
I want to take astronomy next quarter, and I was thinking of registering for the online course.
Have you ever taken an online course before?
No, but I have a computer, and it seems fairly easy to take a course this way.
Let me just point out a couple of things. First, you have to be able to learn on your own, mainly by reading, so you have to be self-motivated. There are a few online lectures, but mainly you have to read the information on a computer. You also have to keep up with a schedule, just as in any other class. So unless you're self-motivated, online courses are generally not a good idea. In fact, there's a fairly high dropout rate for online courses.
I didn't know that. It seems like it would be so easy, because you don't have to be in class at a specific time.
Believe it or not, the main reason that students drop out is they miss going to class. They miss the face-to-face contact with the professor. So, if interacting with the professor and other students is important to you, then you should consider taking a regular classroom course.
The advisor expresses her opinion about online courses. State her opinion and explain the reasons she gives for holding that opinion. Now listen to part of a talk in a business class.
When you think about it, corporations have all the familiar elements of other types of culture. Corporations have values, norms, rituals, symbols, and so forth. As in any society, these things define the whole group. Corporate culture gives meaning to the daily activities of the company. The company logo and colors are like the flag of any nation. In a lot of corporations, your rank is signified by the suit you wear and the size and location of your office. Corporations have rituals like the employee picnic or the executive fishing trip. These rituals bring people together to celebrate corporate unity. There are also corporate texts, such as the sayings of the founder or president. Generally speaking, well-established companies have traditional corporate cultures. For example, new employees may learn the company song or may wear the corporate uniform of dark suit, white shirt, and striped tie. Business hours are standard, and office conduct is formal. In contrast, many new technology firms have a very informal culture. Employees go to work in blue jeans, T-shirts, and sneakers. They may come and go at will. They may bring their pets to work. In informal cultures like this, there are often no fixed traditions to follow.
Explain how corporations are similar to any other culture, and explain how corporate culture varies in different companies. Now listen to a conversation between two students.
Hi, Jim. How's it going this quarter?
Well, to be honest, not very well. I just got my geology test back, and I'm afraid my grade was not good. I'm disappointed, too, because I like the professor and the class.
Oh. Well, would it help if you got a tutor?
I don't know. The main problem is I don't have enough time to study. My boss has asked me to work more hours at my job, and that leaves me less time for geology.
Oh, I see. Well, what if you quit your job?
I can't afford to do that.
But maybe you could look for a different job here on campus. The campus jobs are posted in the Career Center.
Well, maybe, if I could find a job that pays as well as the one I have. I just wish I had more time to study. I need to pass my geology course.
You know, you could drop the class now and take it again next quarter. You already have the textbook, and you could read ahead on your own.
Well, I need to do something fast because I can't fail the course.
Describe the man's problem and the suggestions the woman makes about how to solve it. What do you think the man should do, and why? Now listen to part of a lecture in a marine biology class.
Ocean scientists study several physical properties of water, including transparency, or water clarity, and color. Clear water indicates an absence of particles suspended in the water that would affect the ability of light to pass through it. Water clarity determines how much plant growth there may be in an ocean region. Plant growth usually depends on how deep the sunlight will reach. The clearer the water, the deeper the light will penetrate. The color of seawater varies a lot from place to place. For example, the water of the Gulf Stream in the Atlantic Ocean is a deep indigo blue, while a similar current in the Pacific off Japan is called the Black Stream because of the very dark color of its water. Along many coasts, the water is green. The green color is a mixture of blue, due to the scattering of sunlight in the water, and the soluble yellow pigment associated with phytoplankton, the floating plant life. In some places, the water is brown or brownish-red. Brown or brownish-red water gets its color from large quantities of certain types of microscopic brown algae. Brown algae are common among temperate coasts, where the water is cool. Their brown color comes from the brown pigments they contain. A bucket of water scooped from the surface of the sea may contain millions of microscopic brown algae. In tropical or subtropical regions, various shades of blue are common. The blue color results from the scattering of sunlight by tiny particles suspended in the water, or by molecules of the water itself. Blue light has a short wavelength, and because of this, blue light is more readily distributed than light of longer wavelengths. Therefore, the ocean appears blue for the same reason that the sky does.
Using points and examples from the lecture, explain why some ocean water is clear and why some water is a certain color. Writing section directions. The writing section measures your ability to use writing to communicate in an academic environment. There are 2 writing questions. Question 1 is an integrated writing task. You will read a passage, listen to a lecture, and then answer a question based on what you have read and heard. You have 20 minutes to plan and write your response. Question 2 is an independent writing task. You will answer a question based on your own knowledge and experience. You have 30 minutes to plan and write your response. Now listen to a professor's response to the reading.
Why do people travel to distant lands? Centuries ago, their reasons were primarily political or economic, for conquest or colonization. The idea of traveling for personal enrichment is fairly modern, only a few centuries old, and traveling just for adventure is even newer. It's interesting that the reading mentions Ernest Hemingway's big game hunts in Africa as an example of traveling for adventure. Actually, Hemingway illustrates the conquest ideal in tourism. Hemingway was an adventurer who traveled to so-called savage lands to hunt wild animals and bring back trophies. Of course, only a few people at the time could afford his style of travel, with servants to make the trip more comfortable. Yet Hemingway was very influential, and his writings were very popular. You can still see his influence in tourism today, especially in sports that involve the control and conquest of nature like hunting and fishing. The tourists of today take trips purely for pleasure, recreation, adventure, and of course personal growth. More travelers seek out the most distant places as well as the most unusual cultures. We can see this in ethnic tourism, a new kind of cultural tourism that includes visits to traditional villages and people's homes to observe social customs and see native arts and crafts and watch local ceremonies and so on. Ethnic tourism helps preserve Aboriginal cultures that might otherwise be endangered by assimilation into the larger society. In fact, ethnic tourism allows us to enjoy folk dances, songs, costumes, and ceremonies that might otherwise be lost. Another growing area of tourism is environmental tourism, which is kind of related to ethnic tourism. Environmental tourism is traveling to pristine wilderness areas where few people have gone before. The goal is to observe and learn about nature. The African safaris of today, for example, are for the purpose of observing and photographing wildlife, not killing it.
Summarize the points made in the lecture and explain how they are similar to or different from points made in the reading.